Hey, good morning, everybody. You doing all right? Yeah. So time change, you move the clocks back, or move it ahead. So that means that you're here, and you actually want to be here. There's going to be people who normally are at a first service, and they're going to come in the next service, and they're going to act like that's what they always do. But you show up, you're the disciplined people, you want to be here, and you really hope it's worth it, right? Me too. I'm excited just to be with everybody. I love our church community. I love the different type of people who call Terra Nova home. We've got people of different backgrounds, different faith stories, different ages, and it's really fun to see that reflected. And so I think it was last Sunday, I'm out on the patio before one of our services, and I'm having a conversation with two people out there. And one of them is a guy who's probably a couple decades older than me, and the other person was a gal, and she's probably a couple decades younger than me. And so we're talking together, and as we're out there, there's this lady, and she's got a really cool shirt on, and both of us notice, and so we're like, that's a great shirt. Where'd you get it from? And she says that she bought it from, I don't know where. It was an online retailer. I've heard it before. I'm aware that people who are younger than me and cooler than me shop there, but I understood what she was saying, right? It was like, oh, I know that word. The older guy, not so much. He was like, huh? And then it took a minute and got him up to speed, and he was tracking at that point. And then he did something amazing. I love this. His face was downcast. He looked sad. And then he let out a little sigh, and then he confessed, I miss Mervyn's. He said, I miss Mervyn's, the department store, not making that up. And it was beautiful and heartbreaking for this gentleman. But what was great was that the tables had turned, and now the younger gal, she did not know what he was talking about, right? I'm pretty sure she thought Mervyn must have been the name of a friend of his who's no longer with us, and he's just letting that out in that moment, right? And so he explained, what Mervyn's was this department store, and it would be like an anchor store attached to these malls that we used to go to. And so that got me thinking about malls all week long. My daughter is 13. She, will sometimes go to the mall, go to the Spectrum, and I've explained, here's kind of what it was like back in the day when I would go to the mall. First, maybe it's a Saturday morning, late morning, and we get dropped off, and we're gonna hang out at the mall for the next maybe 3 to 14 hours, right? So we're gonna be there all day long. What do you do at the mall? Well, maybe you see a movie. After that, you just begin to roam. You walk kind of aimlessly. You start to wander. You might snag a Cinnabon. You remember those? Maybe an Orange Julius if you're feeling up for it. You go into a store like Sam Goody, and then you proceed to listen to an album, like the entirety of it, and you've got these headphones. They have not been cleaned ever, and you put them on, and there's girls, they're getting like these glamour pics done with their friends, and then they pass them out at school. There are carts or kiosks that are set up inside the mall, right? And they're all over the place, and you can get everything there. You can get a new case for your pager. You can get that there. You, no matter how many times you say, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, you will get sprayed by some sort of cologne or perfume that makes you cough for the next 20 minutes. And hey, you know what's a good idea? Why not, in front of everybody here in the middle of the mall, go ahead and get a massage. Get a massage for 20, 30 minutes, because it's great value. It's great value, and that's what we care about, right? And so that was going on. And during the 90s, everywhere you go, you would see these pictures. I don't know if you remember these types of pictures. They were all over the place, these optical illusions, where if you began to stare long enough, you're supposed to be able to see a different image. It's like, just kind of turn your head and focus on this, and you'll see something. They're called magic eye books. I had a ton of them. But these images, they've been around for a long time. There are different varieties of them. And so, for instance, here's like an example of what I'm talking about, an image where you go, hey, if you're looking at this one way, you might see maybe a young lady, and she's looking out to the future, like she's looking in front of her, she's got a feather on her cap, but if you look at it another way, you're going, that's the face of an older lady, and maybe you've seen this before, and you go, I know what you're talking about, or maybe you're like, don't click to the next slide, I need to see this, and you get the idea, right? That most people, they look at something and they see a specific image. But then if you look at it from a different perspective, it allows you to see something that you actually did not see at first. And so today, we're getting it there. It's like, we can just wait. We can wait. There's not much else I have to say. Well, like John said, we've been in this series, Eyewitness. Today we're in part 49 of the series. We've been in it, part 10. We've been in it for a while, but it's been great. We've been looking at one of the biographies of the life of Jesus as told by a man named John, who is one of his closest followers. And as John writes about these experiences that he sees firsthand, he has this goal or this hope in mind. There's something that he wants to have happen as a result of people learning about Jesus and understanding what John himself saw with his own eyes. And he includes this towards the end of his account. He says this, "See, these things, these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." And so John hopes that as he provides this accurate, firsthand eyewitness perspective, that other people would hear that and they would understand it and they would get to the point where they would believe or believe into Jesus. They would place their trust and their confidence and their own hope into Jesus. And as we follow his way, we would experience this true, real, satisfying, deep life. And so as he sets out to get us there, he organizes his account surrounded by these 7 different signs that Jesus performs. And as we've said, these are not magic tricks. They're not stunts. It's not sleight of hand. They're signs. They're miracles, but they're miracles that actually point to something or to someone. They point to Jesus. They point to his nature, his power, his ability, and his character, like who he actually is. And so far, we've seen a number of these different signs. But in addition to these signs, John includes these 7 statements that Jesus makes about himself. They're often referred to as Jesus' I am statements. I am, the name that we see God uses for himself as he reveals himself to Moses, but it's like an add-on. Not just I am, but Jesus says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. And last week, as we saw, I am the gate. And I am the good shepherd. I'm the one who lays down his life for his sheep. And so as Jesus is revealing his own character as the good shepherd, the one who chooses to lay down his life and the one who says, I am able to take it up again, John opens up another scene with an additional sign, and we discover another I am statement that Jesus makes. And so we're going to dive into John chapter 11, starting at verse 1. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. And Lazarus was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, he says, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. And as the scene opens here, John is giving us this heads up that this is not the last time you're going to see the names of these people appear. But Mary and Martha, they've got this brother, Lazarus, and Lazarus is really sick, and they're not just sending an update. It's not simply a prayer request, would you pray for our brother? They're sending somebody on a trip, probably a day's journey, to find Jesus and to relay this reality. That Lazarus, our brother, this one that we're convinced you love so dearly, he is dying, and we need you. And we need you right now. So verse 4. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. And this must have initially sounded like really good news to the disciples. It's like, great, Lazarus, this guy that we see, like you care about him, that is great that he is going to be okay. But the way that Jesus responds here, it's really familiar. It's something that's very similar to what he said a few chapters back in John chapter 9. Jesus and his disciples, they encounter a man, and he's born blind, and they're not sure what to make of the situation and why he has this limitation in their minds. And they're going, okay, is it his sin? Is it somebody else's sin? But Jesus lets them know it's bigger than like a why. It's about a what. What might be accomplished through this man and through what was going on. And in that moment, Jesus says it's so that the works of God might be displayed. In other words, that God was going to use these circumstances, and this one here with Lazarus in a similar way, a way that helps people see God's glory. And that word means like the entire like weight or power or splendor or the brilliance of all that God is. And so now, verse 5, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. And all of this, as I read it, it's really interesting to me because John, the author, is adding this in there for us beforehand. He's saying, I need you to trust me. I saw all of this with my own eyes, and I was convinced of this, that when it came to those 3 people, Jesus loved them. And yet after we got the message, we stayed put for 2 more days. But then after a couple days, Jesus decides to head back to Judea. And there are times in life where it is helpful to have the memory of a goldfish, where you're like, you know what, this really bad thing happened, and I got to shake it off. I got to let that go. I can't focus on that. I got to release it. But then there are times where it's not so helpful, and his disciples are going, Jesus, now is one of those moments where you need to remember. Verse 8, see, Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you want to go back there? They're like, now is not the time to go back. Do you not remember this? Well, Jesus responds, but honestly, I don't know if they fully grasp what he is saying here. And he says this, he says, see, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. And after he said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. And his disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Like, right? Let him rest. Well, Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. And so then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, this is wild, for your sake, I'm glad I was not there. Why? So that you may believe. But let us go to him. It's like, huh? What is he saying here? Well, Thomas, the disciple who often gets remembered for a moment when he expresses doubt, in this moment, he says something powerful. He says, well, if you want to go to Judea, let us also go that we may die with him. And maybe there's a point where perhaps there could be some sort of sarcasm with Thomas saying, like, you want to go there? Let's go with Jesus so we can die there. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's blind bravado of like, yeah, let's go. Like, if Jesus is going to go there, we're going to go there too. But apparently Thomas knew something, and it was something that they all knew, that if Jesus decided to go back to Jerusalem, just a couple miles away from there, it was clear what awaited him. It was death. And that's what was in store for Jesus. And Thomas assumed that if we follow him, then we go to the same place that he goes, and that's what's in store for us as well. And so they head towards Bethany, and they get there, but it's too late. Like way, way too late. Because Lazarus was not asleep, he was dead, and at this point he had been dead for 4 days. And the home is full of people who have come to be with Martha and Mary and mourn with them. And the wailing and the weeping and the grief, it is all very much present and palpable. And so verse 20, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. And I want you to think for a second, if you're Martha, could you imagine the different emotions you're feeling in that very moment? I mean, you are absolutely devastated. You're mourning. You're broken. You were convinced that Jesus could have done something about all of this. You're also convinced that Jesus loved you, and he loved Lazarus as well. You know that he got the message, but it's now that he shows up. Verse 21, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Wow. If you had been here, my brother would still be alive. If only you showed up. If only you would have come when we called for you. If only you would have been here when we needed you the most. If only, she says. And it is so powerful, and it's so honest, and it's so vulnerable. And to be real, there are times where I see people say things throughout the scriptures, and I'm like, I don't know that I would feel the same way or do the same thing. And then there are moments like this where I'm like, I get that. I get that feeling. Because I could imagine if I was walking through something like she's walking through, I would feel similar to the way that she feels. But she's not done. She says, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, but I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. And that is like another, maybe even bigger wow for me, that there are these two responses from Martha, and it just blows me away because at the same time, we see this brutal honesty and unflinching confidence. There's this like overwhelming sadness and disappointment, and they are paired with unshakable hope. And it is so helpful to remember that both of those things, both of those responses can coexist as we seek to show up with Jesus. Well, verse 23, Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And all of us, we've been in situations where somebody says something and they want to make us feel a little bit better, right? We are experiencing some really difficult emotions and they want to console us and they say something nice, right? Don't be sad about this. You'll see them again. You'll be reunited one day. And it feels like that's a nice thing to say. Sometimes we're like, that's a true thing I actually believe. But in other times we go, it feels hollow in this moment. It feels insensitive. It feels maybe just unhelpful right now, maybe even tone deaf when people say things like that. And maybe you're like, is that what Jesus is doing right here? Well, Martha, she's so gracious, and she answers him. And she says, see, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And it's this nod to a belief that she and the people of Israel had, that there would be a resurrection at the end of the age where God raises the dead to life in his kingdom. And she's like, yeah, I know that. I know that answer. I'm aware of that. I know how the story goes and what happens on the very, very end of the story. But Jesus said to her in verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. And the one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Martha, you are right. There will be a resurrection, but you need to know this, that I am the resurrection. And he's not rejecting her answer. He is saying he is the fulfillment of all that she has hoped for. Right, that at this time, that where people would be raised to new life in this age to come, in the kingdom of God that you look forward to, he says, do you know who has the power to initiate that kingdom? Do you know who is like the manifestation of it? He says, it's me. I am, and I am the resurrection and the life. And he asks her in that moment, do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. And immediately after this, Martha heads back to the house, and she lets Mary know that Jesus is here, and Jesus would like to talk with you. And so there's a crowd of mourners that are surrounding them and showing up, and that's part of what life looked like in their culture. And so everybody is just filled with this grief, and Mary is overcome with emotion, and they all make their way to Jesus. And when she gets to Jesus, she collapses, she bows down, she gets down, and maybe it's out of reverence, maybe it's out of worship, maybe it's all that she can bring in that moment, but she is down on the ground, and she says the same words that her sister said. She says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her were also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And that actually means like he was upset, he was angered about this. And there were a lot of things that maybe Jesus was upset by. Maybe it's like all these people who have been seeing him, walking with him, seeing all these signs and miracles, and he's like, they still don't believe I can do something about this?
Maybe it's the way that it feels like they're walking through life utterly hopeless, like people who are mourning, not yet knowing that they have an ability to mourn in a different way from everybody else. Maybe it's anger and disdain towards death and the brokenness that it brings to this world, or maybe it is seeing some people that he cares so much for, just feeling overcome with grief. But whatever it is, Jesus asks, "Where have you laid him?" "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And in that moment, John says that Jesus wept. And it's really rare that you see so few words communicate something so powerful, right? And the writer, the author, John, he knows that he's like, well, I've got to write this down. And as Jesus' followers and the crowd looks on at what is taking place in front of their eyes, they said, "See how he loved him," because that much was clear to everyone. But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" And doesn't always feel like there's just always got to be somebody who can't help themselves, right? It's in the midst of like this really inappropriate time or tragedy, and they say something they think is so clever, and it is so unhelpful, it is so inappropriate, it's so insensitive, and they show up here. Well, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb, and it was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. And he says, "Take away the stone." "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there's a bad odor because he's been dead for 4 days." And then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" That phrase again, we see it again. Did I not say, if you believe, if you trust in me, if you put all your weight into me, that you will see the fullness of God, you will see the beauty and the splendor and the brilliance and the power of God. So verse 41, they took the stone away, and then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I mean, I know that you always hear me, but I'm saying this for the benefit of the people who are standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, and he said, "Lazarus, come out." And as people began to talk and the story began to circulate, the author, John, he's like, man, I want people to know what I actually saw in that moment with my own eyes. And he says, the dead man came out, and his hands and feet were wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." You're like, what? Like it's like an actual mummy coming out of the grave, and you're like, that is wild. That's insane. That's crazy. That's a miracle, but it's more than a miracle, right? It's a sign, and it's a sign that is pointing to something and to someone. It is pointing to the power and the authority that was given to this man. It's a sign of what is to come. It's a sign that is directing all of them to a location, to Jerusalem, and what would await Jesus. And it's a sign that points to the tomb and what would await the grave. Resurrection, it was not just yes, someday we have this hope that there might be a resurrection, but now it was you have seen this with your own eyes, and you have seen him, because Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And you thought that this story ended one way because you always saw it from this angle, and that was all you could see. But now I'm telling you, there's a brand new perspective where if you look at this a certain way, you will recognize that the end of the story is different, because this will not end in death, Jesus says. It does not get to have the final word. Death will not win. And as you can imagine, word about this miraculous sign is getting out, and the news makes its way to the religious leaders. And so they call a meeting together of their high council, known as the Sanhedrin, and they need to figure out an answer to this pressing question. They're wondering, what are we going to do? They asked each other, because this man certainly performs many miraculous signs. They're not doubting that. And if we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him, and then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. and they are clearly concerned. They're not concerned that they are in direct opposition to the man that they believe is performing all of these signs. They're concerned that he's gaining more and more influence, and greater numbers of people are beginning to believe in him and follow him, and that this might create an uproar. And if that happens, the Roman army is going to come here, and they're going to take away our temple, and they are going to destroy our people. And in the midst of that conversation, as other people are talking, the high priest, Caiaphas, he speaks up and says, "You know nothing at all," which is a great way. If people are having a conversation and you're listening, that's a great first line. You know nothing at all. But he says this: you don't realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. In other words, he's saying it's very simple if you look at it from this perspective. It's do the math, everybody. You're right. There is a risk that our entire nation might suffer if there's unrest and our people might perish. But there's a better option than all of the people perishing. And so let's decide that rather than all of us suffering, we will make a sacrifice. Let's decide that we're going to sacrifice the life of this one man, Jesus, on behalf of all of the people. And as John is writing this, he's reflecting on this, just this ignorance and its willful blindness of the religious leaders. And he says, yep, that's exactly what is happening here. They're unwittingly being involved in God's plan, that God would use Jesus, his son, to be the sacrifice for all the people, but not just the Jewish people, the entire world. And so, from that day on, they plotted to take his life, and for several months, Jesus is kind of forced to lay low because the time had not quite fully come for him to do what he had came to do. But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. And the signs are in front of all these guys. They're the leaders, right? And yet they refuse to pay attention to everything that it meant. And in fact, it gets so bad that they decide, they're like, you know what? We got to figure out how to kill Lazarus too. Because all these people, they're seeing Lazarus, and they see this is the guy who Jesus raised from the dead, and people keep seeing him, and now they're believing him. They're like, we got to kill Lazarus, and they don't realize Lazarus does not stay dead, right? That's part of this guy's deal. Well, months go by, and time has passed, and now is the week leading up to Passover, and thousands of Jews have made the journey to Jerusalem for this celebration, and everybody is wondering, is there any way that Jesus might actually show up? And then, with the city full of energy and people and all abuzz about who Jesus is and who he might be and what could happen, he does it. With a bounty on his head, he comes riding in on a donkey. And it instantly kind of triggers the words of the Psalms and the prophets. And Jesus makes his entry into Jerusalem. And the people are going wild. They're shouting praises. They're taking palm branches and they're waving it. And everybody is wondering, can this actually be true? Is the kingdom of God here? Has it come for us? And is Jesus, the Messiah, come to rescue and liberate his people? Is it time for us to enthrone him? And he's going to be like this great military leader for us. But Jesus' kingdom was going to look so much different than what the crowds had in mind. And yes, he had come to Jerusalem to initiate his kingdom, but he would do so by these means which were dramatically different from what anyone expected. And you see, in the story, we have only covered 6 of the 7 signs that Jesus performs in John's account. And so there's one left. But before that's going to take place, well, Jesus, he wants to cover some of the most important information, essentials about what it will mean to follow him and be his people in the world and where his disciples will follow him to. And so as we continue the series, that's where we go next week. But before we get there today, there's one additional scene in John chapter 12 that I want us to look at because it's in the midst of this excitement and celebration and anticipation that we get another glimpse that causes us to wonder, maybe I've been looking at this the wrong way. Maybe there's a different perspective that Jesus wants us to see this through. So in verse 23, Jesus says this in John 12. See, now the time has come for the Son of Man to enter into his glory. We see that word again, and they're hearing this, and they're thinking, glory? All right, we're excited for that. This is going to be great. What is your glory all about? What does your glory look like? And he says, I tell you the truth. Unless a kernel of wheat is planted into the soil and dies, it remains alone. But its death will produce many new kernels, a plentiful harvest of new lives. And see, those who love their life in this world will lose it. Those who care nothing for their life in this world will actually hold on to it for eternity. And anyone who wants to serve me must follow me. Why? Because my servants must be where I am. And the Father will honor everyone who serves me. And so Jesus says this. He says, if you want to follow me, you go to where I am going. And does anybody know where Jesus is going? Thomas is like, I know where Jesus is going. He is going to die. And Jesus says, where I go, just be ready to go there with me. Why? Because, verse 32, he says, when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw everyone to myself. And the author John says, he said this to indicate how he was going to die, in case you're missing it, right? Well, the crowd responded, we understood from Scripture that the Messiah would live forever, so how can you say that the Son of Man will die? Just who is this Son of Man anyway? You're saying, what do you mean? Because I don't understand what you're saying. It doesn't make sense. I've always understood this from a certain perspective. And you're telling me there's a different way to look at it. And when I live my life in such a way where I take all of my power and my influence and I willingly lay it down and I say, God, I will be a servant. You're telling me I keep my life that way? And you're telling me that like a kernel of wheat, that life can come from death? You're telling me that something that might seem like the worst possible scenario could actually lead to the best possible outcome. And you're telling me that all of this is what your glory looks like? Because that's different, Jesus. That is new. That's a way to look at life that changes everything, and it changes it forever. And apparently that is part of the glory of God. That there are times where with Lazarus, there's a situation, and it appears like things have gotten far worse, and yet what we discover is that God is actually able to reveal his glory in the midst of seemingly hopeless circumstances. Meaning that sometimes during the darkest moments and seasons of life, the seasons that we did not ask for, the seasons that we would never want to go through again, that we are actually able to get a clear picture of all that God is, of his brilliance, of his splendor, of his beauty and power and plans. And it happened with Lazarus, and that was about to happen with Jesus in his own life. And his followers were about to see the worst imaginable thing that they could ever think of happen to the best person that they ever knew. And so as you reflect on all of that, how does that sit with you? How does all of that sit with you, knowing that that has happened, and it happens to people? You're like, oh, they're amazing, and that happened to them? That can happen to people that you love, and it's clear to everyone that you love them, and yet it happens to them? How does it sit knowing that that has or can or maybe is happening with you? That there might be something that you go through where you see the solution to a problem. You see the way that a prayer should be answered, right? You see the way that the pain could actually be minimized, or the way that the illness would find a cure. You see the relationship and how it's supposed to get mended, or that the loneliness would find companionship, or that your desperation would find hope. You see all of that. It is very clear. You see that God could do something about it. You want to believe he can. You believe that he's capable of it. And you believe that he cares enough to act. And so like the sisters, maybe we begin to lament or to wonder, God, if you were here, none of this ever would have happened. And so what gives? Why doesn't he act the way we believe would be best? And apparently, there seem to be times when God allows things to appear like they're getting worse in order for his power, his goodness, or his glory to be seen more clearly. And that's not often the answer that you and I want to hear, but if it's true, and if we can actually trust what Jesus said, then it changes the vision that we have for the way we live our lives and even what we begin and how we begin to pray for things. That we would say, God, even though I am confused and I'm upset and I'm desperate and I'm angry, I want to believe that you might be up to something that I cannot see. I want to believe that this will not end in defeat, that this will not end in death. And so while it appears that everything right now is wrong and is broken and is falling apart and I am feeling hopeless, please, please, please help me. Help me to see your goodness and your power and your love, that you care, that you're with me. Help me see your glory. And when all I see right now is just this desperation that I am feeling, when all I see is the end of a dream that I had, or even the end of a life here on earth of a loved one, help me see that there is another way that the final chapter might end. When all I can see is the cross, help me see that it does not end there. It ends with an empty grave. Help me see, Jesus, that you are the resurrection and you are the life. So as we wind down this morning, I want to invite you to bring to mind what it is that you might feel this way about. And maybe in this moment, just set things aside, take a deep breath, maybe just close your eyes, open up your hands, and maybe begin to talk to God right now. Talk to God about what it is that just feels so broken in life right now. The thing that you might say, okay, this has got all of my attention, and I've got a hope for how things might move forward. And maybe it's happening in your life. Maybe it's happening in a loved one's life or somebody you care about right now. And so on your own, as you just tell God what that thing is, it's this health battle you're facing. It's this marriage. It's a career and a hope for what you have for your future. It's a relationship with a family member. Tell God what you're hoping to see. And again, be honest about many disappointment or discouragement that you're carrying and your desires. But then I want to invite you to do something bold. I want to invite you to ask God to help you see things in a different way, to not only see your pain, but to see what He may be up to. How God can take any situation that feels like it can't get any worse and bring hope and new life and resurrection to it. That He would use that to show you His goodness and His glory. And so with those things on our mind, I invite you to continue just to talk to God right now. Bring both your honesty and your pain, as well as your hope and your belief that God would use the circumstances that we walk through to show us that He is the resurrection and the life.
When all I see is the battle, you see my victory. When all I see is the mountain, will you see a mountain moved? And as I walk through the shadows, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am here with you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. When all I see is the cross, or you see an empty tomb. So when I fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high, oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet. Oh, I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
One of the themes throughout John is the ability to see. Sight and blindness, light and dark. And Father, in these moments, we pray that you would give us eyes to see as you see, light in the darkness. We can see the things that we're facing, how you might be working. We can see resurrection and life even in the midst of it all. We thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen.